I stood on the flight deck of USS Enterprise that morning of June 4th, 1942, watching our dauntless dive bombers warming up for launch, their engines roaring like angry lions preparing to strike. The Pacific Ocean stretched endlessly before us, painted gold by the rising sun, deceptively peaceful for what was about to become the graveyard of the Imperial Japanese Navy's proudest carriers. Somewhere out there, 200 miles northwest of Midway Island, Admiral Chuichi Nagumo's four carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu, the same ships that had devastated Pearl Harbor just 6 months earlier, were steaming confidently toward their target. Their decks loaded with aircraft, their crews preparing for what they believed would be another easy victory. What they didn't know was that we had been reading their messages for weeks. We knew exactly where they would be. We were about to spring the most devastating ambush in naval history. My name is Norman Jack Dusty Kleiss, Lieutenant Junior Grade, dive bomber pilot with Scouting Squadron 6 aboard Enterprise. Born in Coffeyville, Kansas in 1916, Naval Academy graduate, class of 38, earned my wings in April 41. By June 42, I thought I understood carrier warfare, but nothing prepared me for what we were about to witness. The complete destruction of Japan's carrier force in 5 minutes that would change the entire course of the Pacific War. 5 minutes. That's all it took. 5 minutes when American dive bombers caught 4 Japanese carriers with armed aircraft on deck, fuel lines open, ordnance everywhere. 5 minutes of screaming dives, released bombs, massive explosions. 5 minutes that killed thousands of Japanese sailors, destroyed 4 carriers, ended Japanese naval superiority forever. The numbers tell part of the story. 4 Japanese carriers sunk. Akagi, flagship of the Pearl Harbor Strike Force. Kaga, converted battleship carrying 60 aircraft. Soryu and Hiryu, fast modern carriers, all sent to the bottom, 3,570 Japanese dead. Against 1 American carrier lost, Yorktown, and 362 Americans killed. But numbers don't capture what happened that morning. They don't show the torpedo squadrons that attacked first, knowing they'd die, pulling Japanese fighters down to sea level. They don't show Commander Wade McCluskey following a lone destroyer's wake, betting everything on finding the enemy fleet. They don't show the dive bombers pushing over at 20,000 feet, accelerating through anti-aircraft fire, releasing bombs at 1,500 feet, pulling out so low you could see sailors' faces. They don't show Japanese carriers exploding, flight decks erupting, aircraft blown overboard, ammunition cooking off, fires spreading uncontrollably, men jumping into oil-covered water, destroyers trying desperately to rescue survivors. The ocean, littered with debris and bodies. They don't show what it felt like to return to Enterprise, fuel gauges reading empty, some aircraft ditching because they couldn't make it back. The exhaustion, the realization of what we'd done, the knowledge that friends wouldn't return. Japan was stunned. They'd believed their carrier force was invincible. They'd destroyed American battleships at Pearl Harbor. They'd conquered the Philippines, Malaya, Singapore, the Dutch East Indies. They'd sunk British warships off Ceylon. Nothing could stop them. They were the strongest naval power in the Pacific. Then, in 5 minutes at Midway, everything changed. Their 4 best carriers destroyed, their most experienced pilots dead, their advance halted, their confidence shattered. The war's momentum reversed in the time it takes to drink a cup of coffee. Admiral Yamamoto, architect of Pearl Harbor, received the news hundreds of miles away. His elaborate plan to destroy American carriers had failed catastrophically. He'd lost the battle, lost his carriers, lost thousands of men. Japan would never recover. The rest of the war would be retreat, defense, desperation. This is the story of those 5 minutes. How we got there, what happened, why it mattered. Told by someone who was there, who dove through anti-aircraft fire, who put a 1,000-pound bomb through Kaga's deck, who watched Japanese carriers burn, who survived to tell the story. 6 months after Pearl Harbor, Japan seemed unstoppable. December 7th, 41. They destroyed or damaged 18 ships, killed over 2,400 Americans, crippled the Pacific Fleet. By June 42, they'd conquered territory from Burma to the Solomon Islands, from the Aleutians to the Dutch East Indies. Half the Pacific was theirs. Nothing stopped them. Wake Island fell after heroic defense. Guam captured. The Philippines overwhelmed despite American and Filipino resistance. General MacArthur evacuated to Australia. Singapore, Britain's great fortress, surrendered. British battleships Prince of Wales and Repulse sunk by Japanese aircraft. The Dutch East Indies conquered, securing oil Japan desperately needed. Rabaul taken, becoming Japan's main base in the South Pacific. Their carrier force was undefeated. 6 large carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, Hiryu, Shokaku, Zuikaku, veteran pilots with hundreds of combat hours. Modern aircraft, especially the Zero fighter that dominated everything we flew. They'd struck Pearl Harbor, supported invasions across the Pacific, raided Ceylon in the Indian Ocean. No navy could challenge them. American forces were reeling. Our battleship fleet crippled. Our carriers, few, precious, hunted. Our aircraft inferior. Our pilots, less experienced. We'd lost battles at Java Sea, lost territory everywhere, retreated constantly. Morale was terrible. Civilians on the West Coast feared invasion. Military leaders wondered if we could hold Hawaii, much less Australia. But we had one advantage the Japanese didn't know about. We were reading their mail. Commander Joseph Rochefort ran Station Hypo, the Navy's code-breaking unit at Pearl Harbor. His team of cryptanalysts, linguists, and radio operators worked around the clock, intercepting and decoding Japanese naval messages. The main code, JN-25, was incredibly complex, but Rochefort's team had made progress breaking it. By May 42, they could read significant portions of Japanese operational messages. They knew a major operation was coming. Code name, Operation MI. Target location, identified by the letters AF. But where was AF? Rochefort believed it was Midway Atoll. Tiny islands, 1,400 miles northwest of Hawaii. If Japan captured Midway, they could threaten Hawaii, force American carriers into decisive battle, complete their defensive perimeter. Some intelligence officers disagreed. They thought AF might be the Aleutians, or even Hawaii itself. Admiral Ernest King in Washington was skeptical, but Rochefort was certain. He devised a clever test. He had Midway send an uncoded message saying their freshwater distillation plant had broken down. Days later, Japanese intercepts mentioned AF having water problems. Proof: AF was Midway. Admiral Chester Nimitz, Commander-in-Chief Pacific Fleet, made the critical decision. He would risk his 3 operational carriers, Enterprise, Hornet, and Yorktown, on this intelligence. If wrong, Japanese could trap and destroy American carriers. If right, we could ambush them instead. Yorktown was damaged from the Coral Sea battle in early May. Shipyard workers said repairs would take 3 months. Nimitz gave them 3 days. 1,500 workers labored around the clock. 72 hours later, Yorktown sailed. Still incomplete, but operational. That carrier's aircraft would prove decisive. Vice Admiral William Halsey was hospitalized with skin disease. Rear Admiral Raymond Spruance, a cruiser commander with no carrier experience, took command of Enterprise and Hornet Task Force. Critics questioned the choice. Spruance proved brilliant, making perfect tactical decisions throughout the battle. Rear Admiral Frank Jack Fletcher commanded overall from Yorktown. Fletcher was cautious, criticized for being too defensive. But at Midway, his decisions were sound. The Japanese plan was elaborate. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, combined fleet commander, orchestrated multiple simultaneous operations. Carrier strike force under Nagumo would attack Midway, destroying shore installations and aircraft. Invasion force would follow with 5,000 troops. A separate force would attack the Aleutians as diversion. Yamamoto himself would command from battleship Yamato 300 miles behind, ready to crush American carriers when they responded. The plan assumed American carriers were near Hawaii, that they'd rush to Midway's defense reactively, that Japanese could ambush them after the initial strike. Every assumption was wrong. American carriers were already near Midway, positioned by decoded intelligence. We weren't reacting. We were waiting. The ambushers were about to become the ambushed. Early morning, June 4th, Nagumo launched his Midway strike. 108 aircraft, bombers, fighters, heading for the atoll. He held back half his aircraft for the expected encounter with American carriers. He had no idea we were already there. Station Hypo's breakthrough came in late May 1942, when Commander Rochefort's team achieved consistent ability to read Japanese naval code JN-25. It wasn't perfect, maybe 60% readable, but enough to understand operational intentions. They knew Japanese designator Hido Butai meant carrier strike force. They knew fleet movements, command structures, operational timings. They knew Operation MI, targeted AF. Midway, the discovery wasn't sudden dramatic moment, but accumulation of hundreds of intercepts, thousands of work hours, brilliant deduction. Rochefort's team included linguists who understood Japanese military terminology, mathematicians who recognized patterns in encoded text, radio operators who tracked transmission sources, analysts who assembled fragments into coherent pictures. They worked in basement of building at Pearl Harbor. No windows, constant noise from code machines, surviving on coffee and determination. Lieutenant Commander Edwin Layton, Pacific Fleet Intelligence Officer, briefed Admiral Nimitz daily. Layton presented decoded intelligence showing Japanese carrier force would approach Midway from northwest on June 4th. 4 carriers, 2 battleships, heavy cruisers, destroyers, timing, location, composition, all from decoded messages. Nimitz asked probability assessment. Layton said high confidence, maybe 90%. That confidence came from multiple confirming intercepts. Japanese logistic preparations, refueling schedules, air group assignments, all pointed to Midway operation on that date. The AF water shortage trick confirmed target location. Radio traffic analysis showed carrier force assembling near Japan, then moving east. Everything fit. The incident that sealed Japan's fate was their predictability. Yamamoto's operation order was transmitted in code weeks before execution. Station Hypo intercepted it, decoded it. Read Japanese operational plan like reading newspaper. They knew diversionary attack on Aleutians would come first. They knew Midway strike would launch at dawn. They knew invasion force would follow. They knew Yamamoto commanded from behind with battleships. American response was calculated gamble. Nimitz positioned carriers northeast of Midway, beyond Japanese search range, but close enough to strike once enemy located. He reinforced Midway's defenses, sending Marine fighters, bombers, even Army B-17 seconds. He placed submarines in patrol lines. He did everything possible to maximize advantage from foreknowledge. The discovery of Japanese carrier force on June 4th came from multiple sources. Midway-based PBY, patrol aircraft, spotted them at 5:30 a.m. Radioed position, bearing, composition. Ships were exactly where intelligence predicted. Search pilots maintained contact despite Japanese fighters shooting down one PBY. They reported everything: course, speed, composition, allowing American carriers to calculate intercept vectors. Aboard Enterprise, Hornet, Yorktown, pilots received briefings based on latest contact reports. We knew where Japanese were, what they were doing, when they'd be vulnerable. The Japanese knew nothing about us. Their search aircraft missed American carriers completely. Their reconnaissance was inadequate, searching wrong areas at wrong times. Nagumo believed American carriers were days away. That belief, that fatal assumption, came from Japanese intelligence failure. They'd tracked American carriers recently near Samoa, assumed they'd remain South Pacific. They didn't know Yorktown had rushed north from Coral Sea repairs. They didn't know Enterprise and Hornet had departed Pearl Harbor. Their submarine picket line arrived too late, missing American carriers already on station. The incident that proved decisive was Nagumo's decision to rearm aircraft. After Midway strike launched, his reserve aircraft were armed with torpedoes for anti-ship attack, waiting for American carriers. But Midway's defenses proved stronger than expected. Strike leader radioed second attack necessary. Nagumo ordered reserve aircraft rearmed with land bombs. Ordnance crews began removing torpedoes, replacing them with bombs. Fuel lines were opened. Bomb carts positioned. Decks cluttered with ordnance. Then at 7:28 a.m., scout aircraft reported American ships. At 7:45, additional message amended to include carrier. American carrier located. Nagumo faced terrible choice. Launch immediate attack with bombs wrong for shipping, or rearm again with torpedoes, losing time? He chose rearm. Fatal decision. Ordnance crews began changing ordnance again, removing bombs, reinstalling torpedoes. Bombs and torpedoes stacked on deck. Aircraft crammed together, maximum vulnerability. Meanwhile, American carriers launched strikes. Torpedo squadrons departed first. Dive bombers followed. Fighters escorted. Over 200 aircraft heading toward Japanese fleet. The convergence was set. American dive bombers approaching. Japanese carriers vulnerable. 5 minutes from catastrophe. Admiral Nimitz's reaction to decoded intelligence was decisive risk-taking that characterized his entire Pacific campaign. He believed Rochefort completely, staking everything on intelligence accuracy. Some officers urged caution. What if intelligence was wrong? What if Japanese were decoying us while striking elsewhere? Nimitz overruled doubters. He ordered his 3 carriers positioned for ambush. He accepted risk because alternative, defensive posture, waiting for Japanese initiative, guaranteed eventual defeat. Vice Admiral Halsey's illness forced Nimitz to choose replacement. He selected Raymond Spruance, despite lack of carrier experience. Critics called it strange choice. Spruance commanded cruisers, not carriers. He'd never directed air operations. But Nimitz recognized Spruance's methodical thinking, careful planning, and decisive action. Halsey was aggressive, sometimes reckless. Spruance was calculated, never reckless. At Midway, calculated approach proved perfect. Rear Admiral Fletcher's reaction was professional caution. He commanded overall, but deferred tactical decisions to Spruance. Fletcher positioned Yorktown separately from Enterprise and Hornet, providing flexibility. When contact reports arrived, Fletcher authorized immediate launch. He understood timing was critical. Japanese carriers were vulnerable only while recovering and rearming aircraft. Miss that window, miss the battle. Aboard carriers, pilots' reactions varied. Some were combat veterans, calm and focused. Others were flying first combat mission, nervous and excited. We understood stakes. Intelligence briefings made clear this was decisive engagement. Win here, change war's momentum. Lose. Japan dominates Pacific indefinitely. My reaction was professional detachment mixed with adrenaline. I'd flown combat missions before, Marshall's raids, other strikes, but this was different. 4 Japanese carriers, Pearl Harbor veterans, best pilots in world. If we missed, they'd hunt us. If ordnance malfunctioned, we'd die. If fuel ran short, we'd ditch. Too many variables. Focus on mission. Commander Wade McCluskey's reaction demonstrated leadership. He commanded Enterprise Air Group, responsible for coordinating strike. When rendezvous with Hornet's aircraft failed, McCluskey decided proceed alone rather than waste fuel waiting. When arriving at intercept point found empty ocean, McCluskey made critical decision. Don't turn back. Search northeast. That decision saved battle. Japanese reaction showed overconfidence and confusion. Nagumo had defeated every opponent for 6 months. His carriers were undefeated. His pilots were experienced. He expected victory. When Midway's defenses proved stubborn, he was annoyed, not concerned. When Scout reported American ships, he was surprised, but not alarmed. When amended report included carrier, he was finally concerned. Too late. Nagumo's staff argued options. Launch immediate attack with wrong ordnance, rearm properly, accepting delay, recover Midway strike force first. Each option had problems. Nagumo chose rearm, prioritizing proper ordnance over speed. His entire career emphasized proper preparation. That philosophy, sound in other contexts, proved fatal here. Japanese pilots preparing for launch didn't know American dive bombers were approaching. Some were in cockpits, others waited below. They'd been briefed on attacking Midway again, then told prepare anti-ship strike, now told rearm again. Confusion delayed everything. Ordnance crews worked frantically, but couldn't work faster than physics allowed. Time needed to remove bombs, install torpedoes, arm fuses, check systems. American torpedo squadrons attacked first. Their reaction was heroic fatalism. They knew devastators were obsolete, slow, vulnerable. They knew Japanese fighters would intercept. They knew casualties would be catastrophic. They attacked anyway. Torpedo 8 from Hornet, led by Lieutenant Commander John Waldron, pressed attack despite overwhelming opposition. All 15 aircraft destroyed, 29 men killed, 1 survivor. Torpedo 6 from Enterprise lost 10 of 14 aircraft. Torpedo 3 from Yorktown lost 10 of 12. The torpedo squadrons were annihilated. 41 aircraft launched. Only 6 returned. But their sacrifice was not wasted. They pulled Japanese combat air patrol down to sea level, chasing slow torpedo bombers. Japanese fighters were perfectly positioned to massacre torpedo squadrons, perfectly positioned to miss dive bombers at altitude. When dive bombers arrived at 20,000 feet, no Japanese fighters intercepted. The Zero fighters were down low, finishing off torpedo squadrons, landing to rearm and refuel. Japanese carriers were caught at maximum vulnerability. Armed aircraft on deck, fuel lines open, bombs and torpedoes stacked everywhere. Officers and crew watching torpedo attacks, not watching sky above. McCluskey's dive bombers pushed over. Bombing 6 attacked Kaga. Scouting 6 attacked Akagi. Yorktown's bombers attacked Soryu. Within 5 minutes, 3 carriers were fatally hit. The reaction, Japanese and American, was disbelief. That battle could turn so quickly. Japanese operational plan for Midway embodied multiple contradictions that doomed it before battle began. First contradiction was divided forces. Yamamoto split combined fleet into multiple groups. Carriers here, battleships there, invasion force elsewhere, diversionary attack far north. Traditional naval doctrine emphasized concentration of force. Dividing forces violated that principle. Japanese believed superior skill compensated for dispersion. Wrong. Second contradiction was elaborate timing, requiring perfect coordination. Aleutian's diversion would draw American attention north. Carrier strike would soften Midway. Invasion force would land troops. American carriers would respond predictably. Japanese carriers would ambush them. Yamamoto's battleships would finish survivors. Each phase depended on previous phase working perfectly. One failure cascaded into disaster. Japanese planners assumed Americans were near Hawaii, would react defensively, would follow predictable patterns. Those assumptions came from success against colonial powers. British, Dutch, who did react predictably. Americans didn't. We were already positioned offensively, waiting to ambush ambushers. Fourth contradiction was intelligence failure. Japanese had excellent intelligence before Pearl Harbor, knowing ship positions, defenses, timing. By Midway, their intelligence was terrible. They didn't know American codebreakers were reading their messages. They didn't know Yorktown was operational. They didn't locate American carriers before battle. They operated blind, while we operated with perfect information. Fifth contradiction was tactical inflexibility. Japanese doctrine emphasized predetermined plans executed precisely. When circumstances changed, adjusting was difficult. Nagumo's dilemma about rearming aircraft showed this. He couldn't quickly adapt when situations shifted. American doctrine emphasized flexibility, adjusting to circumstances, seizing opportunities. McCluskey's decision to search beyond intercept point exemplified this. Sixth contradiction was aircraft performance versus doctrine. Japanese Zeros were superior dogfighters, light, maneuverable, long range. Japanese doctrine emphasized fighter sweeps, dogfighting, aerial supremacy. But at Midway, those advantages were irrelevant. Zeros were drawn down by torpedo attacks, couldn't intercept dive bombers at altitude. The superior fighter was wrong place, wrong time. Seventh contradiction was pilot quality versus quantity. Japanese pilots were highly trained, hundreds of hours experience, carefully selected elite. But small numbers. Losses at Coral Sea hurt. American pilots had less experience, but more replacements available. We could sustain losses. They couldn't. Quality couldn't overcome quantity in attrition warfare. Eighth contradiction was carrier doctrine. Japanese carriers emphasized offensive power, maximum aircraft, minimal defensive systems. They believed attacking first won battles. At Midway, they were caught vulnerable between strikes, neither fully offensive nor defensive. American carriers emphasized balanced capabilities, offensive aircraft, but also defensive guns, damage control, survivability. Ninth contradiction was damage control. Japanese carriers had poor damage control. Few trained specialists, inadequate equipment, cultural bias against defensive measures. American carriers had excellent damage control. Trained teams, modern equipment, emphasis on survivability. Japanese carriers suffered catastrophic damage from single hits because fires spread uncontrolled. Tenth contradiction was strategic goals versus capabilities. Yamamoto wanted decisive battle, destroying American carriers. But Japanese fleet, despite apparent superiority, couldn't find American carriers, couldn't protect own carriers, couldn't coordinate complex operations. Strategic ambition exceeded operational capability. 11th contradiction was victory disease. 6 months of unbroken success created overconfidence. Japanese commanders underestimated opposition, overestimated own capabilities, dismissed warnings. That overconfidence led to inadequate reconnaissance, poor defensive positioning, delayed reactions. 12th contradiction was fundamental, most fatal. Japanese plan required Americans to not know Japanese were coming, but we knew everything. Code breaking eliminated surprise completely. Every Japanese advantage: better aircraft, more experienced pilots, superior fleet, negated by American foreknowledge. The contradiction between their plan, assuming surprise, and our actual knowledge was unbridgeable. These contradictions intersected at June 4, 1942, 10:22 a.m. Japanese carriers caught rearming aircraft. American dive bombers attacking unopposed. 5 minutes of contradictions resolving simultaneously, all against Japan. Their elaborate plan, their superior forces, their veteran pilots, all rendered irrelevant by fundamental strategic and tactical errors compounded by American intelligence advantage. The contradiction Japanese commanders never resolved was how to win war against opponent with superior industrial capacity, greater resources, unbreakable codes. Midway proved they couldn't. Victory there would have delayed defeat, not prevented it, but defeat at Midway made eventual outcome certain sooner. Torpedo Squadron 8's investigation revealed heroism and tragedy. Lieutenant Commander John Waldron led 15 TBD Devastators from Hornet at 7:52 a.m. June 4th. Waldron was part Sioux, Oklahoma native, Annapolis graduate, experienced aviator. He briefed his pilots the night before, saying, "If there's only one plane left to make the run, I want that man to go in and get a hit." Prophetic words. Waldron separated from Hornet's dive bombers and fighters, trusting instinct about Japanese location. He found them. He attacked. 0 fighters intercepted immediately. Devastators were slow. 115 miles per hour attack speed. Zeros were fast. 330 miles per hour. The slaughter was methodical. Zeros made diving passes, machine gun fire tearing through Devastator's thin skin. 30 caliber defensive guns couldn't stop them. One by one, Devastators fell, smoking, burning, exploding, crashing into ocean. Torpedoes released, but none hit. Japanese carriers maneuvered, avoided tracks. Within 20 minutes, all 15 Devastators destroyed. 29 men dead. Ensign George Gay, only survivor, watched from water as Squadron died around him. He hid under seat cushion, avoiding strafing Zeros, witnessed entire battle. Torpedo 6 from Enterprise suffered similarly. Lieutenant Commander Eugene Lindsay led 14 Devastators, intercepted by Zeros. 10 aircraft destroyed. Lindsay killed. 4 survivors limped back with dead engines, wounded crew, fuel exhausted. Lieutenant Junior Grade Severin Rombach crash-landed near Enterprise, rescued but died from wounds. Torpedo 3 from Yorktown, led by Lieutenant Commander Lance Massey, attacked 3rd. 12 Devastators. 10 destroyed. Massey killed. 2 survivors. The investigation showed torpedo squadrons faced impossible odds. Obsolete aircraft. Defective torpedoes often failing to detonate. No fighter escort because fighters couldn't stay with slow torpedo planes. Orders to attack despite certain death. The consequence was catastrophic casualties, but tactical success. 41 torpedo bombers launched, 6 returned, 35 aircraft destroyed, 80% loss rate, over 50 men killed. But they accomplished mission. They pulled Japanese fighters down low. They disrupted Japanese formations. They fixed Japanese attention seaward, not skyward. They created conditions for dive bomber success. Investigation after battle examined why torpedo attacks failed while dive bombs succeeded. Torpedoes were Mark 13. Notoriously unreliable. They ran too deep. Missed targets. Detonators failed. Japanese ships maneuvered, avoided tracks. Devastators approached slowly, giving defenders time to react. Everything favored defenders. Dive bombers faced different equation. They attacked from altitude 20,000 feet. Acceleration in dive reached 300 miles per hour. Brief exposure time. No Japanese fighters at altitude to intercept. Bombs released at 1,500 feet, pull out at 500 feet. Japanese carriers couldn't maneuver fast enough. Bombs hit. The consequence for Japanese was complete surprise. They'd just finished destroying torpedo squadrons. Combat air patrol was low on fuel, landing to rearm. Deck crews were rearming aircraft for strike. Officers were celebrating torpedo squadron defeat. Nobody was watching sky above. When lookouts finally spotted dive bombers, seconds warning. No time to scramble fighters. No time to sound alarms. No time to take cover. Lieutenant Dick Best led 3 dauntless dive bombers from bombing 6. Best saw other bombers attacking cargo, realized that carrier was already targeted. Made instant decision to attack different carrier. Best attacked Akagi. 1 bomb hit, penetrated flight deck, exploded in hangar deck. Akagi was doomed from single bomb because armed aircraft, fueled aircraft, bombs and torpedoes everywhere. Secondary explosions destroyed ship from inside. Scouting 6, my squadron, attacked cargo. Multiple bombs hit. Flight deck erupted. Fires spread immediately. I released my bomb at 1,500 feet. Saw it hit near bridge, saw explosion, saw debris flying. Pulled out. Nearly hit water. Leveled out. Looked back. Cargo was burning intensely. Yorktown's bombers attacked Soryu. 3 bombs hit within minutes. Soryu's flight deck shattered. Fires ignited fueled aircraft. Crew abandoned ship within 20 minutes. Soryu sank in hours. 3 Japanese carriers fatally damaged in 5 minutes. Investigation afterward tried to understand how such complete victory happened. Conclusion was combination of factors. Intelligence giving us advantage. Torpedo squadron's sacrifice. McCluskey's decision to keep searching. Perfect timing. Japanese vulnerability. American determination. Everything converged. The consequence was strategic. Japan lost 3 carriers immediately. Hiryu, 4th carrier, launched counterattack, damaged Yorktown. But American dive bombers found Hiryu that afternoon, sank her too. 4 carriers gone. 3,000 Japanese dead. Japan's naval superiority ended. War's momentum shifted. Pacific offensive stopped. Investigation revealed Midway wasn't just tactical victory, was strategic turning point. Japan would never recover carrier strength. America's industrial capacity would produce carriers faster than Japan could sink them. The balance tipped permanently at Midway. Multiple strategic theories competed before Midway. Offense versus defense, concentration versus dispersion, surprise versus attrition. Japanese chose offense, dispersion, surprise. Americans chose defense, concentration, foreknowledge. Theories clashed June 4, 1942. Yamamoto's theory emphasized decisive battle, Mahanian doctrine. Inherited from Alfred Thayer Mahan's naval theories. Concentrate fleet. Seek decisive engagement. Destroy enemy battle line. Victory comes from big gun battleships, destroying enemy capital ships. Yamamoto adapted theory for carriers. Carrier aircraft became long-range artillery. Carrier battle becomes decisive. Sink enemy carriers, win war. His strategy for Midway embodied this. Lure American carriers from Pearl Harbor, ambush them near Midway, destroy them with concentrated carrier air power, finish with battleship guns. Decisive victory ends American Pacific capability. Force negotiated peace. Theory was sound. Execution was flawed. American theory under Nimitz emphasized calculated risk. Don't seek battle unless advantageous. Use intelligence. Position forces carefully. Strike when enemy vulnerable. Preserve own forces. Attrite enemy over time. Nimitz rejected decisive battle concept. Instead, sustained attrition. Sink enemy carriers gradually, replace losses faster. Industrial capacity wins. His strategy for Midway demonstrated this. Don't fight fair. Intelligence for ambush. Position carriers northeast. Unexpected location. Wait for enemy to expose vulnerability. Strike decisively when opportunity appears. Avoid Japanese battleships. Carriers attack carriers, ignore everything else. Theory proved superior because it was flexible. Fletcher's theory emphasized coordination. Concentrate American carriers. Coordinate strikes. Multiple squadrons attacking simultaneously overwhelmed defenses. Theory was sound, but execution failed. Hornets aircraft launched early, arrived early, found nothing. Some ditched from fuel exhaustion. Enterprise and Yorktown struck later, separately, but timing accidentally perfect. Uncoordinated attacks worked better than coordinated ones would have. McCluskey's strategic decision to search beyond intercept point exemplified adaptive theory. Original plan was fly to calculated position, find Japanese carriers, attack. When arriving at position found nothing, doctrine said, turn back, preserve fuel, return to carrier. McCluskey rejected that. He gambled on searching northeast, following intuition and that lone destroyer. Theory of aggressive searching versus conservative fuel management. Aggression won. Waldron's theory was sacrifice for mission. Torpedo squadrons knew casualties would be catastrophic. Devastators were obsolete. Zeros would intercept. But someone had to attack first. Pull fighters down. Create opportunity for dive bombers. Waldron accepted suicide mission because theory said sacrifice of few enables victory for many. His squadron died. His theory proved correct. Nagumo's theory emphasized methodical preparation, proper ordnance for proper targets, bombs for shore installations, torpedoes for ships. Don't improvise, follow doctrine. When situation changed, his theory said, rearm properly, even if delayed. Theory failed because rigidity prevented adaptation. Spruance's theory was preserve carriers. After Midway strike, Japanese fleet scattered, some ships northwest, invasion force southwest, Yamamoto's battleships west. Some commanders urged pursuit, press advantage, sink everything. Spruance refused. Theory said Japanese battleships had superior guns, superior speed, superior night fighting capability. Don't chase into ambush. Mission was sink carriers. Carriers sunk. Mission accomplished. Withdraw. His decision was criticized initially. Some thought timid, but investigation afterward proved brilliant. Japanese battleships were positioned for night surface action. If Spruance pursued, American carriers would have been destroyed. Preserving carriers mattered more than pursuing remnants. Post-battle strategic analysis revealed multiple theories' validity depended on context. Decisive battle theory worked for side with superior forces, perfect information. Didn't work for side divided, surprised, vulnerable. Attrition theory worked for industrial superior power with time. Didn't work for resource-limited power needing quick victory. Flexibility theory trumped rigid doctrine. McCluskey's search, Waldron's sacrifice, Best's independent targeting, all exemplified flexible adaptation. Japanese rigidity, Nagumo's rearm decision, Yamamoto's complex plan, All failed when circumstances changed. The strategic lesson of Midway was simple. War isn't won by best theory, but by best adaptation. Side that adjusts wins. Side that insists on predetermined plans loses. American commanders showed flexibility. Japanese commanders showed rigidity. Outcome followed logically. Another strategic revelation was intelligence value. Theory said battles won by firepower, numbers, skill. Midway proved intelligence trumps everything. Knowing where enemy will be, when they'll be vulnerable, what they plan, worth more than additional carriers. Code breaking was force multiplier beyond calculation. Final strategic theory Midway demonstrated was industrial capacity decides long wars. Japan couldn't replace carriers quickly, couldn't train replacement pilots adequately, couldn't sustain losses. America could do all three. Therefore, time favored America. Quick, decisive victory was Japan's only chance. Midway eliminated that chance. Attrition warfare from June 42 until August 45, outcome was predetermined. America's industrial capacity versus Japan's limited resources, only one possible result. Midway made that result inevitable sooner. The deeper mystery of Midway wasn't why America won, but why Japan was so completely vulnerable at precisely that moment. Statistically improbable. 4 carriers caught simultaneously with armed aircraft on deck, fuel lines open, ordnance everywhere. What created perfect convergence? Investigation revealed multiple factors intersecting fatally. Nagumo's indecision about rearming. Midway strikes delayed return. Scout aircraft's late report of American carrier. Torpedo squadron's attacks pulling fighters down. Dive bombers arriving at exact moment of maximum vulnerability. Each factor individually wouldn't have been decisive. Combined, they were catastrophic. First factor was Nagumo's rearm decision. 7:07 a.m. June 4th, scout aircraft reported American ships, but didn't specify carriers. 7:15. Nagumo ordered reserve aircraft rearmed from torpedoes to bombs for second Midway strike. Crews began changing ordnance. 7:28, another message, 10 ships, including apparent carrier. Nagumo reversed orders. Rearm again with torpedoes. Crews reversed work. This indecision created chaos. Second factor was timing. Midway strike launched at 4:30 a.m., scheduled to return around 8:30. But Midway's defenses were stronger than expected. Aircraft were damaged, pilots tired, some planes needed emergency landings. Recovery took longer. Meanwhile, reserve aircraft couldn't launch because flight deck needed clear for landing damaged aircraft. Window of vulnerability lengthened. Third factor was inadequate Japanese reconnaissance. Scout aircraft launched late due to catapult problems. Search pattern had gaps. One scout's engine malfunctioned, aborted mission. That scout was assigned sector where American carriers were located. Mission abort meant gap in reconnaissance exactly where it mattered most. American carriers went undetected until critical moment. Fourth factor was combat air patrol management. Japanese fighters were deployed low, defending against torpedo attacks. When torpedo squadrons attacked in waves, fighters engaged them, shot them down, landed to rearm. Fighter direction was poor. No reserves at altitude. When dive bombers appeared at 20,000 feet, no fighters could intercept. The perfect altitude separation, torpedo planes low, dive bombers high, negated Japanese fighter superiority. Fifth factor was American timing. Accidental, but perfect. Enterprise and Hornet launched early. Aircraft separated, arrived different times. Yorktown launched later. Normally, coordination failure, but torpedo squadrons attacked first, pulled fighters down. Then, when fighters were landing to rearm, dive bombers arrived. Uncoordinated timing accidentally created sequential attacks, preventing effective defense. Sixth factor was McCluskey's navigation. Following that destroyer's wake, finding fleet at precisely the moment of maximum vulnerability. 5 minutes earlier, Japanese might have launched strike. 5 minutes later, they might have recovered aircraft. McCluskey arrived at exact right moment. Was it luck? Skill? Divine intervention? Mystery remains. Seventh factor was Japanese damage control failure. Akagi, hit by single bomb, should have been survivable, but fire spread rapidly because damage control was inadequate. Fueled aircraft ignited. Ordnance exploded. Secondary explosions destroyed ship. Same pattern on Kaga, Soryu. Poor damage control turned survivable hits into fatal fires. The turning point was exact instant bombs hit. 10:22 a.m., June 4th, 1942. Everything changed. Before that moment, Japan winning. After that moment, America winning. 5 minutes divided Pacific War into before Midway and after Midway. Before, Japanese advance, American retreat. After, American advance, Japanese retreat. Historical analysis shows turning points aren't always obvious during battle. Participants don't know they're experiencing history-changing moment. Only afterward, reviewing, understanding emerges. But Midway's turning point was obvious immediately. Pilots saw carriers exploding. Sailors saw fires burning. Commanders saw strategic balance shifting. Everyone knew instantly that something fundamental had changed. The mystery deepened when considering alternate outcomes. If Japanese launched 30 minutes earlier, if scout aircraft hadn't malfunctioned, if Nagumo hadn't changed rearm orders, if torpedo squadrons attacked different times, if McCluskey turned back at empty intercept point, any single change might have prevented convergence. Battle might have been draw, Japanese victory, American withdrawal. Pacific War trajectory would have been different. But history doesn't deal with might have been. Deals with what was. What was at Midway was perfect convergence of American advantages and Japanese vulnerabilities. Intelligence, timing, sacrifice, determination, luck, all intersecting precisely. The deeper mystery isn't why convergence happened. Mystery is understanding how fragile history is, how small decisions, chance moments, individual choices determine nations' fates. Midway proved history balances on knife edge. Push one direction, empire falls. Push other direction, empire survives. We pushed right direction. Midway's immediate implication was strategic reversal. Before June 4, 1942, Japan possessed carrier superiority. 6 large carriers versus 3 American. After Midway, 4 Japanese carriers sunk. Balance shifted to 3 American versus 2 Japanese. But numerical parity understated actual advantage. Japanese lost irreplaceable experienced pilots. America's training programs produced replacements quickly. Long-term implication was industrial capacity deciding war. Japanese shipyards couldn't replace carriers fast. America's shipyards were building Essex-class carriers, larger, faster, more capable than anything Japan could construct. By 1944, America would have dozens of carriers. Japan would struggle completing handful of conversions. At Midway, carrier numbers were close. 2 years later, overwhelming American superiority. Tactical implication was dive bomber effectiveness. Dauntless proved decisive weapon. Japanese had dive bombers but didn't employ them effectively at Midway. American doctrine emphasized dive bombing as primary anti-ship weapon. That doctrine proved correct. Post-Midway, dive bombers became standard carrier equipment. Every American carrier air group included dive bomber squadron. Intelligence implication was code-breaking value. Station Hypo's success proved signals intelligence was war-winning capability. Navy expanded code-breaking efforts. More personnel, more resources, more emphasis. By 1943, reading Japanese messages was routine. That intelligence advantage contributed to every subsequent victory. Midway demonstrated intelligence was force multiplier beyond traditional calculation. Training implication was American pilot production. Japanese lost 90 experienced pilots at Midway. Not just killed, but wounded, exhausted, demoralized. Replacing them was impossible. Japanese training program produced 100 pilots annually. American program produced thousands. Quality versus quantity debate resolved at Midway. Quantity won. Well-trained average pilots in superior numbers defeated highly trained elite pilots in limited numbers. Damage control implication was survivability. Yorktown survived multiple bomb hits, one torpedo hit, stayed operational for hours. Japanese carriers sank from single bomb hits because damage control was inadequate. American emphasis on survivability, redundant systems, trained damage control teams proved decisive. Post-Midway, damage control became priority. Ships designed with better compartmentation, fire suppression, repair capability. Strategic implication was defensive perimeter. Japan's plan was capture Midway, threaten Hawaii, force negotiated peace. Midway defeat ended offensive operations. Japan went defensive, holding conquered territory, hoping attrition would discourage America. But defensive strategy failed because American industrial capacity overwhelmed Japanese defenses gradually. From June 42 onward, Japan retreated. Psychological implication was confidence shift. Before Midway, Japanese pilots felt invincible. After Midway, they doubted. Before Midway, American pilots felt inferior. After Midway, they believed they could win. Psychological warfare often dismissed as intangible, but at Midway it was measurable. Japanese morale plummeted. American morale soared. That psychological shift affected every subsequent battle. Allied implication was global strategy. Before Midway, Britain and Soviet Union worried America would prioritize Europe over Pacific. Midway victory proved America could fight two-front war successfully. Churchill and Stalin gained confidence. American forces could hold Pacific while supporting European operations. Strategic coordination improved. Japanese implication was strategic reassessment. Admiral Yamamoto knew after Midway that Japan couldn't win. Best hope was defensive war, attrition, negotiate peace before America's full power deployed. But Japanese military culture prohibited defeatist thinking. Offensive operations continued despite Midway's lessons. Guadalcanal, New Guinea, Aleutians, all campaigns draining remaining strength. The ultimate implication was war's outcome became inevitable. Before Midway, multiple possible outcomes existed. Japanese, victory, negotiated peace, prolonged stalemate. After Midway, only one outcome was possible. American victory. Timeline uncertain. Casualties unknown. But result was predetermined. Japan's offensive capability was broken. America's industrial capacity would overwhelm them eventually. Historical implication extends beyond World War II. Midway demonstrated that wars are won by intelligence, industrial capacity, training, adaptability, not just courage and superior weapons. Modern militaries study Midway for lessons about information warfare, logistics, flexible doctrine. Battle fought 80 years ago remains relevant because fundamental principles don't change. Side with better information, better logistics, better training, better adaptation, wins. Final implication was human cost. 3,570 Japanese died. 362 Americans died. Thousands more on both sides wounded physically and psychologically. Wars are decided by young men dying far from home. Implications measured in victory and defeat, but paid for in blood. Midway's strategic importance shouldn't obscure human tragedy. Those who died, American and Japanese, deserve remembrance not just as statistics, but as individuals who gave everything. Standing on Enterprise flight deck at 0400 hours, June 4th, 1942, I wasn't thinking about history or strategy. I was thinking about survival. Would my aircraft function properly? Would ordnance release correctly? Would fuel last? Would I find target? Would I return? Personal, immediate, human concerns overwhelmed strategic abstractions. My rear gunner, John Snowden, was from Illinois, farm boy, quiet, competent. We'd flown together for months, trusted each other completely. He checked his twin .30 caliber guns, loaded ammunition, secured equipment. We didn't talk much. Nothing to say. We knew mission, knew risks, knew each other. Walking toward aircraft were veterans. Calm, focused. Others were new, nervous, trying to hide fear. Squadron mates, friends. Some wouldn't return. Who? Unknown. Maybe me. Except that. Focus on mission. Japanese sailors that morning faced similar thoughts. Aboard Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, Hiryu, young men preparing for battle, they destroyed Pearl Harbor, conquered Pacific, believed they were invincible. But they were still human, still felt fear, still wanted to survive. Enemy or not, they were young men, far from home, doing duty as they understood it. The Torpedo Squadron pilots knew they'd probably die. Obsolete aircraft, overwhelming opposition, orders to attack anyway. Some wrote last letters. Some made peace with fate. They launched knowing odds were terrible. That's courage. Not absence of fear, but action despite fear. Torpedo 8, Torpedo 6, Torpedo 3, they attacked. They died. 41 launched, 6 returned. Ensign George Gay, Torpedo 8's sole survivor, watched his squadron die. Floated in water, hiding under seat cushion, seeing aircraft shot down, exploding, sinking. Saw friends die. Couldn't help, just witnessed. That night, alone in ocean, he saw Japanese carriers burning. Small consolation for squadron's loss. Japanese pilots, who attacked Yorktown that afternoon, showed same courage. They knew American fighters would intercept. They knew anti-aircraft fire would be intense. They launched anyway. Many died. Some scored hits, doing duty despite fear. Human quality transcending nationality. Damage control crews on Yorktown demonstrated humanity under pressure. Ship hit by bombs, fires spreading, flooding increasing. Engineers worked in dark spaces, waist-deep water, toxic smoke. Electricians repaired systems without protection. Medical personnel treated wounded under fire. They saved ship temporarily, gave Yorktown extra hours of operation. When torpedoes hit, they tried again. Eventually abandoned ship, but only when hopeless. Japanese damage control crews faced similar situations but with worse equipment, worse training. Fires spread faster. Secondary explosions occurred. Ships sank quickly. Not because Japanese sailors were less brave, but because systems were inadequate. They tried. They failed. They died. Human tragedy, regardless of nationality. The rescue operations showed humanity in warfare. Destroyers rescued survivors from water. American destroyers picked up American pilots. Japanese destroyers picked up Japanese sailors. Both sides tried saving their people. Some succeeded, many didn't. Oil-covered water, burning ships, shark-infested ocean. Rescuing survivors was dangerous, but crews tried anyway. After battle, counting losses, reading casualty lists, human cost became clear. Squadron mates missing, friends gone, empty bunks, personal effects packed for shipping home. Letters to families saying your son, your husband, your father died serving his country. Form letters can't capture personal grief, but all we could offer, Japanese families received similar notifications. 3,570 telegrams. Your son died at Midway. Your husband won't return. Your father sacrificed himself for emperor. Different language, different culture, same grief. War makes enemies of people who might have been friends in different circumstances. Years later, survivors from both sides occasionally met. American veterans who fought at Midway, meeting Japanese veterans who fought at Midway, initial awkwardness. Then recognition. We were all young men following orders, doing duty, trying to survive. Shared experience transcended former enmity. We understood each other in ways civilians couldn't. I'm 99 years old now, writing this in 2015. Most Midway veterans are gone. Soon, none will remain. But humanity endures. Young men on both sides who fought, who died, who survived, were human first, warriors second. They had families, hopes, dreams, fears. War interrupted those. Sometimes ended them, but didn't erase their humanity. Remembering Midway isn't just remembering victory or defeat. It's remembering people, Americans who attacked against odds, Japanese who defended their ships, everyone who fought, suffered, died, survived. They were all human. That's what matters ultimately. Not who won, but recognizing shared humanity even in warfare. The truth about Midway, the truth that took years to fully understand, is that battle wasn't won by bravest pilots or best aircraft or superior tactics. Battle was won by intelligence officers breaking codes, damage control crews getting Yorktown operational in 72 hours, maintenance personnel keeping aircraft flying, commanders making difficult decisions under uncertainty. Every element was crucial. Remove any one element, outcome might have changed. Commander Rochefort and Station Hypo were invisible heroes. They didn't fly combat missions, didn't face enemy fire, but they gave us advantage that won battle. That intelligence was worth 10 carriers. Without it, we'd have been searching blindly, probably missing enemy entirely. The revelation about Torpedo Squadron's sacrifice came gradually. Initially, their losses seemed tragic waste. Obsolete aircraft attacking superior enemy, all destroyed, no hits scored. But later analysis revealed their attacks were essential. Pulled Japanese fighters down. Disrupted enemy formations. Created opportunity for dive bombers. Without Torpedo Squadron's sacrifice, dive bombers might have faced fighter interception, anti-aircraft fire concentration. Their losses weren't waste, were necessary prerequisite for victory. McCluskey's decision to search beyond intercept point was initially questioned. Some thought he risked losing entire strike force if fuel exhausted before finding targets. But his decision proved decisive. Following that destroyer, finding Japanese fleet at precisely vulnerable moment. If he'd turned back at empty intercept point, battle might not have happened. Japanese carriers might have struck Midway, withdrawn, survived. McCluskey's calculated risk changed everything. The revelation about Japanese vulnerabilities wasn't apparent during battle. Only later, examining records, interviewing survivors, understanding their perspective. Nagumo faced impossible decisions. Rearm for land attack or ship attack. recover damaged aircraft, or launch strike. Every choice had consequences. His indecision wasn't incompetence, was rational response to conflicting priorities. But rational decision-making under uncertainty doesn't guarantee success. Sometimes circumstances overwhelm judgment. Damage control revelation was profound. Yorktown survived multiple hits because American damage control was excellent. Japanese carriers sank from single hits because their damage control was inadequate. Not about bravery. Japanese damage control crews tried desperately, but inadequate training, poor equipment, cultural factors, devaluing defensive measures. Revelation was that survivability mattered as much as offensive power. Training revelation showed American systems' superiority. Japanese emphasized quality, training pilots for years, creating elite force. Americans emphasized quantity, training pilots adequately, producing large numbers. Quality seemed superior initially, but attrition warfare favored quantity. Japan couldn't replace losses. America could. After Midway, Guadalcanal, subsequent battles, Japanese pilot quality declined steadily. American quality improved as experienced pilots trained new ones. Industrial capacity revelation was obvious, but often overlooked. While fighting Midway, American shipyards were building Essex-class carriers. Japanese shipyards struggled completing conversions. By 1944, America had overwhelming carrier superiority. Japan couldn't compete industrially. Midway accelerated inevitable outcome, but didn't create it. American industrial capacity made victory certain eventually. Strategic revelation was that wars aren't won by decisive battles, but by sustained attrition. Yamamoto sought decisive battle, destroying American carriers. Thought one victory would force negotiated peace. Wrong. Americans didn't negotiate after defeats. Replaced losses. Continued fighting. Japanese strategic assumption was incorrect. Revelation was that only total defeat would end war. The personal revelation, what I understood decades later, was that we weren't special, weren't heroes in mythological sense, were ordinary young men facing extraordinary circumstances. Some responded courageously, some responded adequately, some froze. Most did what training prepared us for. The revelation was that ordinary people can accomplish extraordinary things when necessary. Final revelation was about war itself. Wars aren't glorious adventures, are human tragedies. Young men dying, families grieving, societies damaged. Victory at Midway was necessary, prevented greater tragedy if Japan continued unopposed. But celebration should be tempered with recognition of cost. 3,000 Japanese died. 300 Americans died. Each death was individual tragedy. Revelation was that winning doesn't erase tragedy. Historical revelation extended beyond Midway. Battle demonstrated principles applicable to all warfare. Intelligence matters. Logistics matter. Training matters. Industrial capacity matters. Adaptability matters. Courage alone isn't enough. Superior weapons alone aren't enough. Victory requires combination of factors. Any single deficiency can be fatal. Midway revealed war's complexity, showed that simple narratives about heroism or superiority don't capture reality. The final revelation, writing this at age 99, is that surviving means responsibility. To remember truthfully, not glorify, not simplify. Remember complexity, tragedy, humanity. Tell younger generations that freedom requires sacrifice, but sacrifice should never be casual. Remember, those who died weren't statistics, but individuals. Honor their memory by understanding what happened, why it mattered, what it cost. I'm writing this in 2015, 73 years after Midway. Few veterans remain who can say they were there, saw Kaga explode, watched Akagi burn, dove through anti-aircraft fire. Soon, none will remain. But story must endure, must be told, must be remembered. Because freedom-valuing people need to know freedom isn't free, was purchased with blood of men who climbed into obsolete torpedo planes, knowing they'd die, attacking anyway. Looking at photographs from 1942, seeing young faces, some survived, many didn't. Squadron mates who became lifelong friends, squadron mates who died at Midway, Guadalcanal, Philippine Sea, later battles. Each face represents person with family, hopes, dreams. War interrupted those, sometimes ended them. But they served. They gave everything. They deserve remembrance. Norman Kleiss survived war, flew 85 combat missions, received Navy Cross, retired as captain 1962, lived 100 years old, died 2016, among last Midway dive bomber pilots. Wade McCluskey recovered from wounds, retired Rear Admiral 1956. Never sought recognition for decision that changed history. Died 1976, pivotal role largely forgotten by public. George Gay became TWA pilot post-war. Spent decades speaking about Squadron's sacrifice. Wrote Sole Survivor. Appeared at Navy events. Died 1994. Ashes were scattered where Torpedo 8 went down, rejoining men he'd watched die 52 years earlier. Dick Best, who sank Akagi with one perfect bomb, was medically retired after Midway from breathing caustic soda through defective oxygen system. Permanently damaged lungs. Never flew combat again. Lived until 2001. Often called man who won Midway. Japanese carriers rest on Pacific bottom, exceeding 17,000 feet depth. Recently located through deep-sea exploration. Kaga, found 2019. Sitting upright, hull intact, but deck destroyed. Akagi nearby, showing massive fire damage. Soryu discovered, broken hull testament to internal explosions. War graves, tombs for thousands. Reminders of battle's cost. Admiral Nagumo survived, but never recovered from defeat. Relegated to shore commands, eventually commanded Saipan defenses. Committed suicide, July 1944, as Americans overran island. Chief of Staff Kusaka survived, wrote extensively, accepting responsibility while defending Nagumo's impossible decisions. Captain Fuchida, Pearl Harbor attack leader wounded aboard Akagi, survived with broken ankles, became Christian missionary post-war, promoting Japan-America reconciliation. Often said Japan lost war in 5 minutes at Midway. Midway Atoll designated National Memorial 2000. Runway, where Marines faced impossible odds, now wildlife sanctuary. Where bombs fell, albatrosses nest peacefully. Coral waters, where ships burned, now peaceful, visited by tourists. Battle's fury, replaced by nature's tranquility. What should people remember about Midway? Remember that ordinary Americans, facing extraordinary circumstances, rose to challenge. Weren't superhuman. Were farm boys, city kids, mechanics, students. Remember that wars aren't won by best equipment or most experienced warriors, but by those who adapt, seize opportunities, sustain losses, continue. Remember, intelligence mattered. Codebreakers working secretly gave us decisive advantage. Remember, logistics mattered. Damage control crews, maintenance personnel, supply officers. Remember, courage mattered. Torpedo squadrons attacking despite certain death. Remember, calculated risk-taking mattered. Nimitz risking carriers on potentially wrong intelligence. McCluskey risking fuel exhaustion, searching for enemy. Remember, humanity mattered. Americans and Japanese were enemies, but all were young men serving countries, following orders, trying to survive. They deserve remembrance, not as abstractions, but as individuals. Each death was tragedy. Each survival was blessing. Consider alternate histories. If McCluskey turned back, if Japanese launched earlier, if torpedoes worked and Torpedo 8 sunk carriers, small decisions, chance moments, individual choices determining nations' fates. But history deals with what was clear. June 1942, morning, outnumbered American pilots in inferior aircraft caught world's most powerful carrier force at maximum vulnerability and destroyed it. Turned war's tide through intelligence, courage, sacrifice, luck. Today's generation can't imagine democracy endangered, freedom's survival questioned. We did. June 1942, free world's fate rested on few hundred pilots from 3 carriers in mid-Pacific. We were enough. Against odds, logic, we were enough. That's Midway's lesson. When tyranny threatens, free people rise. Sometimes world's fate rests on few brave individuals. Ordinary people do extraordinary things. Soon none remain who can say I was there. But sacrifice wasn't vain. Freedom survived, flourished. Pacific once, battlefield, now peaceful. Japan and America bitter enemies, now close allies. War seeming endless over 70 years ago. Story endures, must endure. Freedom purchased with blood. Remember that. Honor that. Never forget that.